I want to tell you about my late in life discovery of and love of Philip Roth. So, it kind of starts with The Plot Against America. So, Philip Roth is an author, like many, that I kind of had on a list that I've always heard about, and I thought I got to get around to reading him. Big reason for that is Harold Bloom. So in Harold Bloom's final appendix, The Chaotic Age, he lists the most recent writers, and some of them it's just like I'm going to take one for, so Wright Morris, Ceremony in Lone Tree, never read him. Richard Wilbur, New and Collected Poems. Some of them it's just like one or two, right? But when you get to Philip Roth here, there's like a ton of them. So it's like, yeah, I know Philip Roth's important, so I want to read his stuff, and it's just like, where do I begin? Because there's so many. And then this book was, I think, made in like 1994. So the last one on here is Operation Shylock. But then Harold Bloom goes on to talk in many other books. Well, I know in his Novels and Novelists, he talks about numerous Philip Roth books. Anyway, it's a little overwhelming. So I was like, all right, well, it's not like I can pound out one book and then claim familiarity with Philip Roth. So he kind of just went on a list some point in the future, right? So, but my wife, her company was at the time was moving offices. And so we went to pick up stuff that they were giving away, and a really heavy piece of decorative furniture, and which was really annoying. But I looked over into their, I guess it was like their little kitchen area or whatever, and there was a pile of books they were giving away. And this was one of them. And I had heard of this book specifically, but I just saw Philip Roth, and I was like, this is so wrong that a Philip Roth book, I haven't read him yet, but I know he's this canonical master, right? And he's just sitting there in the free pile. It's offensive. So I grabbed it, and I was like, all right, I gotta rescue this book, and I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna read it eventually. And I took it home. I just stuck it on the shelf. And like, I'll read it eventually, right? So I don't know. Anyway, eventually I did get around to reading it, and I loved it so much. And I knew that I was kind of reading it out of order. The only reason I read it was just because I had it. I kind of made that list like, okay, well, if I want to study Philip Roth, at the very least, I should read the ones that Harold Bloom recommends. I like to read things in chronological order so I can see the development of an author and that sort of thing. And so, when you make excuses like that, that's how you end up never reading stuff, right? So I just decided, well, I'm gonna read this one just because I have it, and it blew me away. It's amazing. And this is one of his kind of somewhat later works. So anyway, after I read The Plot Against America, I was like, that's it. I want to read like everything he's ever done. But everything he's ever done is like 31 books, something like that. So that's a little overwhelming too. So I was like, all right, let me just read the Harold Bloom one. So I looked at the Harold Bloom list, and I was like, well, the Harold Bloom list stops at 1994. So like some of his best work is after that. So I'm going to add that to the list. I'm going to do them in order. And before I start, Goodbye Columbus, which is his first work that I guess Goodbye Columbus itself is a novel or novella, and then it also had the Goodbye Columbus book has other stories in it, so it's kind of a collection. But anyway, it won the National Book Award, and it's not even on Harold Bloom's list, but since it's the first, I was like, let me read that so I can get a sense of who this guy was when he was first starting out. So I read this one, and with that one out of the way, I like to keep my books sort of in chronological order. So he goes right after Saul Bellow in terms of what I have, which is what he would like. Actually, he's Saul Bellow, and then the Cliff Notes for Lord of the Flies, and somehow I lost my Lord of the Flies copy that I read in high school, but I'll eventually get another copy of Lord of the Flies when I reread it. So anyway, yeah, then after, with Goodbye Columbus out of the way, I was like, all right, cool. I can get into his most important stuff. And so next up is a very important book, Portnoy's Complaint. Goes right in between Mario Puzo's The Godfather and Cormac McCarthy's Child of God in chronological order of what I have. And then My Life as a Man, which is not technically a Zuckerman novel. There is a Zuckerman character, but it's not really a Zuckerman novel, but it lays the groundwork. And then finally, oh, that's Suttree. Here we go. Zuckerman starts its own shelf. We start with the Ghostwriter. And then there's kind of a tetralogy, the trilogy, and then the Prague Orgy. So I read those, and those kind of begin the world of Nathan Zuckerman. And then the Counterlife, which is, I want to say it's like 1986 or something. And now we're into Bloom's selections, right? So that's why I go from Counterlife to Patrimony. Somewhere in there he wrote The Facts, and I do want to get around to reading it, but I haven't read that one yet. Operation Shylock. By the way, Counterlife, really underrated, man. I don't hear enough people talking about it. Counterlife is a masterpiece. It is brilliant. And so is Patrimony. And Patrimony does get a lot of credit. I think people know about Patrimony. Patrimony, it's interesting, from the Zuckerman stuff, he goes into Patrimony, which is more like a memoir. And so, he goes from like 5 books featuring his alter ego, and then Patrimony is something that's, it's actually written as a memoir of his own memory. So he's the main character, Philip Roth, not Nathan Zuckerman. Then Operation Shylock, which is really cool. Okay, this is probably my favorite, Sabbath Theater. There's a lot of contenders for favorite, but if I had to pick one, it's probably going to be Sabbath Theater. Then a few years later, as we get into the 90s, we have the American trilogy. So you've got American Pastoral, I Married a Communist, and The Human Stain. I had seen the movie The Human Stain with Anthony Hopkins and Nicole Kidman long before I ever read this, and I sort of remembered it, but it was good because it didn't taint it really. I didn't really remember how it ended or anything, which is different from how the book ends. And so I read the book and complete experience of the book, and then I went back and rewatched the movie, and the movie, it's not the greatest movie in the world, but it's just kind of cool. I mean, Anthony Hopkins is awesome. Nicole Kidman, she's too beautiful to be that character, so but hey, I can, as problems go, that's a minor one. It's read the book first, and then sort of check out the movie. So then, all right, so then we get into, that's kind of the last one that I read until Exit Ghost. And this is his last Zuckerman book. So I like to put my stuff in chronological order, and then when I have criticism, so for example, I've got the complete Shakespeare, The Riverside, and then I start putting my general Shakespeare criticism, and then I get into the individual works here. So since Roth, I guess by that same rush, okay, well, it's messed up then, because by that same rationale, all the criticism should come after the last Shakespeare. So my bookshelves are messed up. Anyway, that's why these are here. So this big Blake Bailey biography, which is really interesting if you're a Roth fan. To be honest with you, I don't know how you could read this book without a familiarity with. I don't know why you would, but so kind of I recommend not necessarily read all these, but actually I do recommend all of these and then read this, and it's really interesting. So yeah, man, Philip Roth. So some bad stuff came out about Blake Bailey, just days or weeks after this got published, and so he got canceled, and then not enough people really read this. But worse than that, I mean, Blake Bailey's a big boy, and he's still alive, and he can recover and write another book and defend himself or whatever. But I mean, the bad thing is Philip Roth's dead at that point and can't defend himself, and so I think part of the bad publicity around Blake Bailey kind of led to a sort of secondhand smoke cancellation of Philip Roth. I don't really hear people talking about that much anymore, so hope not, because Philip Roth is a master. I'm so glad that, I heard about him in the first place thanks to Harold Bloom and made a note, I'm someday going to read this. And then I'm really glad I finally kickstarted it with The Plot Against America, which is awesome. And by the way, David Simon, who created the greatest series of all time in The Wire, he took a crack at adapting The Plot Against America into a miniseries, and it was pretty good. And John Turturro's in it. And back to my favorite, Sabbath Theater. John Turturro reads the Audible version of Sabbath Theater, and it's probably like the greatest Audible reading I've ever heard, with the possible contender of Ron Silver, I believe it is, who reads The Plot Against America, and that one's fantastic too. So if you're into Audible, you can listen to them, but I highly recommend reading along if you're going to listen, because you got to see the language on the page. All right. Highly recommend Philip Roth. He has enriched my life forever. I'm incredibly grateful that I discovered him. If this is you discovering him, you're welcome.